Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This evening's major interview with the Army Journal is with Army General Abdurrahman Chiani, President of the Republic, Head of State. In this interview with the President of the Republic, we will address, as is customary, the security issue that has been of great concern to the population in recent weeks, and some current issues. Mr. President, good evening, and thank you once again for giving us some of your time to discuss the insecurity situation prevailing in certain areas of the country. It is no secret that for several years our Sahel region has been facing security problems, primarily related to terrorism. The challenges are significant, but we must recognize that progress has been made, even if much remains to be done. In truth, the difficulty of the task is also explained by the complexity of the security issue in which certain powers outside our space continue to play a destabilizing role in the hope of regaining their now lost privileges. The question is, Mr. President, what is the current state of the security situation in Niger, or even in our space of our AES Confederation? Is the situation under control despite the destabilization attempts? What are the overall prospects? Thank you, Abdoulaye. It is a pleasure to share with all our compatriots from the AES Confederation and the world, who follow us in relation to this security issue in our space.
Par rapport à cette problématique sécuritaire dans notre espace. Vous l'avez dit,
as you said, a problem linked to the interests and peoples of the Confederation, particularly the valiant people of Niger.
Mais permettez-moi, dans un premier temps, de rendre hommage à l'ensemble des peuples de la Confédération, particulièrement au vaillant peuple nigérien, leur présenter mes condoléances.
I offer them my condolences for the civilian and military deaths, and also pay tribute to all our defense and security forces who, at the cost of enormous sacrifices, fight day and night to keep our confederal space, our country, particularly Niger, standing.
Au prix de sacrifices énormes, se battent jour et nuit pour garder notre espace confédéral, notre pays, particulièrement le Niger, debout. Pour répondre à votre question,
to answer your question,
il faut faire un rappel.
We must make a historical reminder because, as the Quran says, the reminder saves.
Le rappel sauve. Il faut rappeler.
It is necessary to remember that, so that Nigerians and other peoples understand the definition of this threat that we are facing.
Définition de cette menace à laquelle nous sommes confrontés. Les implications.
The implications that are behind this threat, which is none other than the defense of the geostrategic or geopolitical interests of the imperialist powers, but particularly neo-colonialist ones.
Géostratégique ou géopolitique des puissances impérialistes, mais particulièrement néocolonialistes. Il faut toujours placer.
It is always necessary to place events in their context of globalization.
De globalisation. Je veux dire placer.
I mean to place the elements or events in their context of globalization by recalling.
En rappelant. In
1979, many have forgotten it, many others did not know about a hostage taking in Saudi Arabia in the Great Mosque of Mecca.
Une prise d'otage en Arabie Saoudite, dans la grande mosquée de la Mecque. Prise d'otage.
Hostage taking of pilgrims associated or attributed to what we call fundamentalists.
À ce qu'on a appelé les fondamentalistes, c'est-à-dire des jeunes.
That is to say, young students who were in the 13th, perhaps doctoral or other levels in the field of Islam,
thèse peut-être de doctorat ou autre dans le domaine de l'islam. Face à cette prise d'otage,
Faced with this hostage-taking, countries would mobilize, and among these countries, of course France will be the first to ask Saudi Arabia to let them make available to the state and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia what we called or still call the GIGN.
De les laisser mettre à la disposition de l'État et du Royaume d'Arabie Saoudite ce qu'on a appelé ou qu'on appelle toujours le GIGN, le groupe d'intervention.
The intervention group of the French National Gendarmerie.
Mais les Saoudiens savaient que
But the Saudis knew that it is the arsonist who wants to play the game of the firefighter.
jouer le jeu du sapeur-pompier. Ils ont poliment
They politely but diplomatically rejected this offer.
rejeté cette offre. Cette offre l'ont substitué
They replaced this offer with the intervention of Pakistani special forces
du Pakistan. Parce qu'ils conçoivent que
because they believe that Pakistani special forces are a force composed of Muslims and that they can access the mosque where several hundred pilgrims were being held hostage.
et qui peuvent accéder à la mosquée où plusieurs centaines de pèlerins étaient pris en otage. Ça s'est passé en novembre.
This happened in November 1979.
La crise va connaître son dénouement.
The crisis would reach its conclusion a month later in December 1979.
Mais ce n'est que le début d'un grand complot.
But this was only the beginning of a grand conspiracy that I cannot recount in its entirety here.
L'un dans l'autre.
All in all, in 1980, the conflict will be shifted, or the neo-colonial and imperialist powers will shift this conflict to Afghanistan.
Les impérialistes vont déporter ce conflit en Afghanistan. Vous savez ce qui s'est passé en
You know what exactly happened in Afghanistan from 1980 to 1986.
Exactement. Vous connaissez les implications qui
You know the implications that took place in
en
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. Après l'Afghanistan,
After Afghanistan,
ce conflit va se déporter
this conflict will shift a little further to Iraq.
plus loin, en Irak. Nous savons ce qui s'est passé en Irak.
We know what happened in Iraq.
Nous connaissons les acteurs,
We know the
nous
actors.
connaissons les implications,
We know the
nous
implications.
connaissons les intérêts
We know the interests and geopolitics and all the unspoken things that unfortunately crowned this period where many Iraqi citizens lost their lives.
Malheureusement, cette période où beaucoup de citoyens irakiens ont perdu leur vie. Le néocolonialisme ne s'arrêtera pas à ça.
Colonialism will not stop there.
Un foyer s'éteint,
One fire is extinguished, another is already programmed to ignite.
le conflit va revenir en Syrie.
The conflict will return to Syria,
Mais avant d'arriver en Syrie,
but before arriving in Syria, they tried to ignite it closer to us in Algeria with the returns of those who were returning from Afghanistan.
qui revenaient de l'Afghanistan. Donc la Syrie
So Syria has been another point of fall of the geostrategic and geopolitical interests of the neo-colonial imperialist powers.
politique des puissances impérialistes néocoloniales. Vous avez suivi ce qui s'est passé.
You have followed what happened in Syria until the last development where everyone followed and everyone discovered the great game of these neo-colonialist powers.
Et tout le monde a découvert le grand jeu de ces puissances néocolonialistes. Mais avant la fin de la Syrie,
But before the end of Syria, they also put a fire on hold that they rekindled.
un foyer en latence qu'ils ont rallumé, c'était la Libye.
It was Libya on our northern border.
Nord. Nous savons ce qui s'est passé en Libye.
We know what happened in Libya and we know who the actors were behind what happened in Libya and what the consequences of this intervention are.
Ce sont les conséquences de cette intervention face à laquelle, malheureusement,
Against which unfortunately our African countries did not have the courage to raise their voices.
le courage d'élever la voix. Je fais ce rappel pour que les gens comprennent.
I am making this reminder so that people understand that if today I am able to address my fellow citizens directly, Many efforts have been made.
Beaucoup d'efforts ont été consentis. Nos forces de défense et de sécurité
Our defense and security forces have made many sacrifices.
sacrifices. Pour venir au cas spécifique du Sahel,
To come to the specific case of the Sahel in general and of the AES Confederation even more specifically and of Niger in particular,
et du Niger en particulier, je rappellerai
I will recall who the actors are behind this situation that we are experiencing today.
que nous vivons aujourd'hui. Ces acteurs ne sont autres
These actors are none other than France, accompanied by the European Union, unfortunately, and the outgoing regime of the United States of America.
et du régime sortant des États-Unis d'Amérique. La France,
France has used several means to destabilize.
plusieurs moyens pour nous déstabiliser. Vous vous rappelez, le 26 juillet,
You remember July 26th,
date de la révolution,
the date of the revolution that took place in Niger.
2 jours après, le 26 juillet 2023,
2 days after July 26, 2023, Emmanuel Macron, who was visiting a territory or department called a defense council, I mean a defense council, on the situation in Niger,
convoqué un conseil de défense. Je dis bien un conseil de défense sur la situation au Niger. C'était bien,
It was good,
je le dis et je le répète, le 28
I say it and I repeat it, on July 28, 2023, so 48 hours after the events of July 26th, decisions were made in front of this council, and among other things, the means must be found everywhere to restore Bazoum to
entre
power.
autres, il faut par tous les moyens rétablir Bazoum au pouvoir. Pour rétablir Bazoum au pouvoir,
To restore Bazoum to power, there were proposals, including the use of ECOWAS as a puppet,
notamment l'utilisation de la CEDEAO comme marionnette. Mais bien sûr, ce n'est pas eux qui disent marionnette.
but of course, it's not them who say puppet, and they present ECOWAS as a defender of democracy, law, and constitutional order.
Constitutionnel. Le régime français
The French regime did not limit itself to using and manipulating ECOWAS.
a utilisé, manipulé la CEDEAO. Ils ont créé, et je l'ai
They
rappelé,
created, and I recall this during my last interview on December 25, 2024, they created a first cell that they called the cell responsible for reflection on the Command for Africa.
qu'ils ont appelé la cellule chargée de réflexion sur le commandement pour l'Afrique. Cette cellule, je l'ai
This cell,
rappelé,
I recalled, was entrusted to Jean-Marie Bockel.
je l'ai dit dans l'entretien,
I said this in the interview on December 25th,
qui lui-même a fait appel à des officiers
who himself called on senior officers of the French armed forces, notably David Pauloki, then Paul Menumberta,
Pawlowski. Ensuite, Paul Menon Bertheux. En son temps également, j'ai dit
At the time, the positions they held were also relevant.
l'un de l'autre, ils avaient eu pour mission
All in all, they had been given the mission by Jean-Marie Bockel himself, appointed and mandated by Emmanuel Macron,
et mandaté par Emmanuel Macron de réfléchir pour trouver les moyens
to reflect on how to find ways not only to prevent any further contamination, since what happened in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger is considered a contagious disease that had to be eradicated by all means.
qu'il fallait par tous les moyens éradiquer. Ces gens ont réfléchi.
These people reflected. I also recalled this in the interview on the 25th, which all our viewers can refer to, and to move faster, they made proposals.
Et pour aller plus vite, ils ont fait des propositions. La France qui est présente
France, which is militarily present in 5 countries, namely Chad, Ivory Coast, Gabon, Senegal, and Djibouti, has in relation to the proposal of the Command for Africa, like AFRICOM of the United States.
et Djibouti, par rapport à la proposition du commandement pour l'Afrique à l'image de l'Afrique comme des États-Unis, proposer que
Suggesting that this number, which was announced to Africans, the French are withdrawing, be increased to 15 countries.
passe à 15 pays. J'ai cité les 15.
I mentioned the 15 countries.
Beaucoup se sont mis à
Many have started to deny it, but you can't deny the
on ne peut
truth.
pas démentir une vérité. C'est une vérité historique.
It's a historical truth now that Emmanuel Macron has confirmed it.
Confirmée. Je ne reviendrai pas
I won't go back over these countries because I've already mentioned them.
citer. Mais les Africains doivent prendre conscience
But Africans must realize that what France is planning, it will do everything to achieve it, even if it's within 100 years.
fera tout pour l'atteindre, même si c'est d'ici 100 ans. Un général français l'avait dit à Abéché,
The French general said, "We were in Africa 200 years ago, we left 60 years ago, we must, since we're back, stay for at least 100 years."
il y a 60 ans, nous devons, puisque nous sommes de retour, rester pour minimum 100 ans. Ce n'est pas des paroles en l'air.
It's not a few months in 2024 that we'll have to cross the Mediterranean with the European Union, even if it's in a year, 2 years, or 10 years, to reconquer Africa by force of arms, because France and Europe without Africa means suffering in perspective.
Qu'il va falloir, avec l'Union européenne, traverser la Méditerranée, même si c'est dans 1 an, 2 ans ou 10 ans, pour reconquérir par les armes sur le feu l'Afrique. Parce que la France et l'Europe sans l'Afrique, c'est la souffrance en perspective. Un autre génie
Another French genius also said, "Since the troops and the French ambassador we expelled are being evacuated, they will use this time, which is favorable for subversive destabilization."
sont en train d'être évacués, ils vont utiliser ce temps qui est favorable à la déstabilisation subversive. Ce n'est pas des paroles en l'air.
These are not words on time.
C'est des paroles mûrement réfléchies,
These are carefully
des
considered
paroles
words.
fruits des échanges stratégiques.
These are words resulting from the strategic exchanges that these people maintain,
Pays africains,
unlike our African countries where everyone, to preserve their second, third or fourth term, are ready to sacrifice their brother.
est prêt à sacrifier son frère. Pour revenir à ce
To return to what was put in place and whose current development we see, still in 2024 after this cell for which Jean-Marie Bockel was responsible, for which he presented the result on October 23, 2024, to the French presidency, Sir Emmanuel Macron.
pour laquelle il a présenté le résultat le 23 octobre 2024 à la présidence française, donc à Emmanuel Macron. Il a initié, il ne s'est pas arrêté.
He
là.
initiated, he didn't stop there to show you the European spirit that surrounds all these events that we are experiencing today.
Ces événements que nous vivons aujourd'hui. Il a entrepris une
He undertook a presentation campaign. He has already done Italy.
Il a déjà fait l'Italie. Il devait faire l'Allemagne.
He was supposed to visit Germany in November 2024,
Et c'est là où nous avons
and that's when we stopped paying attention to these actions and focused on what was essential.
pour nous concentrer sur l'essentiel. Donc après cette cellule,
So after this cell, another cell was created in September 2024.
en septembre toujours de l'année 2024. Cette cellule, ils l'ont appelée
This cell was called the Sahel cell of the Elysée.
Sahel de l'Élysée. La cellule Sahel de
The
l'Élysée
Sahel cell at the Elysée Palace was entrusted to a certain Christophe Guilou, or Guilou, I don't know how to pronounce.
Guilou, je ne sais pas la prononciation. Guilou s'écrit G-U-I.
Guilou is spelled G-U-I-L-H-O-U.
C'est aux téléspectateurs
It's up to the spectators, or the French, to tell us how to pronounce it. but I think it's Christophe Dillou.
Donc c'est Christophe Guilou
So, Christophe Dillou, or I don't know, has also been designated, like Jean-Marie Bockel, as our genius to lead the discussion.
désigné est notre génie pour conduire la réflexion. Je rappelle que
I
Christophe
remind you that Christophe Guilou was the French ambassador to Cameroon and he learned the title of French Special Envoy to the Sahel.
il a pris le titre d'ambassadeur et envoyé spécial français au Sahel. Il va désigner un certain
He will appoint a certain member of the Confederation.
le génie qui va conduire toujours cette réflexion par rapport à la leçon la mieux adaptée à donner au pays de la Confédération. C'est Christophe Jérémy.
This Christophe Jeremy will form his team. He will have the title of Africa Advisor to the LHA.
Le titre de conseiller Afrique de l'Élysée. Je dis bien conseiller Afrique.
I mean, Jeremy Roberts, Africa Advisor at the LHA Palace.
Il va constituer cette cellule Sahel.
He will form this Sahel cell, which will be composed of the French DGSE of the International Organization of the Francophonie,
De l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie. Je dis bien l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie.
I mean the International Organization of the Francophonie, and the Geopolitical Directorate of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Du ministère français des Affaires étrangères. Cette cellule
This cell, as they call it, will have unlimited funds at its disposal.
aura à sa disposition des fonds illimités. Des fonds illimités, je le dis.
Unlimited funds. I say this emphatically because it proves the importance that the subversive French regime attaches to this Sahel cell.
Le régime subversif français accorde à cette cellule Sahel. Disposant de fonds illimités,
With unlimited funds, its mission will be to amplify any event that occurs in the Sahel States Confederation, particularly any event that takes place or has not even taken place in Niger.
durera dans la Confédération États du Sahel. Particulièrement tout événement qui aura lieu ou qui n'a même pas eu lieu au Niger. Je dis bien qui n'a même pas eu lieu.
I'm saying it didn't even take place in Niger.
Elle aura également pour mission
It will also have the mission, through the French DGSE, to conduct all subversive destabilization operations within the Confederation, and particularly in Niger.
action subversive de déstabilisation au sein de la Confédération et particulièrement au Niger. Cette cellule
This Sahel cell will also have the mission of doing everything possible by all means to demonize relations between the states of the Confederation and the Russian Federation, Turkey, China, Iran, and North Korea.
diaboliser les relations entre les États de la Confédération et la Fédération de Russie, la Turquie, la Chine, l'Iran et la Corée du Nord. Voilà entre autres les missions qui ont
These are among the missions that have been entrusted to this cell.
l'importance de ce rappel.
The importance of this reminder is so that our compatriots in Niger, the Confederation, and even the world, since we have a confederal diaspora throughout the world, understand what is currently happening in our
Nous
region.
avons une diaspora confédérale à travers le monde, comprennent ce qui se passe présentement dans notre espace. C'est une guerre
It is an information war.
informationnelle, c'est une guerre de
It is a
déstabilisation,
war of destabilization.
une guerre de
It is a war of new
néocolonisation.
colonization that is conducted with French, European and Western funding.
Les financements français, européens et occidentaux. Mais des puissances, je le répète,
And I repeat, neocolonial, imperialist, Western powers.
occidentales. La France
France and its other acolytes have not limited themselves to the creation of these cells to which they have entrusted very specific missions.
où elles ont confié des missions bien particulières. La France a également
France has also infiltrated all the movements that were initially called independence movements.
qui initialement étaient appelés des mouvements indépendantistes. Ensuite, des mouvements
Then jihadist movements and finally terrorist movements.
enfin, des mouvements terroristes. Puisque le mensonge a beau courir,
Since the lie may run wild,
la
the
vérité
truth will always end up catching up.
rattrapée. C'est à ces forces
It is these neo-colonialist forces and their auxiliary troops, riflemen of our age, that we are facing and facing successfully.
auxiliaires, tirailleurs de notre âge que nous faisons face et que nous faisons face avec succès. Mais pour comprendre les implications,
But to understand the implications, it is this European power at the head with their spiritual guide who have carried out what we can call terrorist repopulation in our confederal space.
avec leur guide spirituel, ont fait ce que nous pouvons qualifier de repeuplement terroriste dans notre espace confédéral. Ce repeuplement terroriste
This terrorist repopulation consisted of what they have in two successive waves transferred from Lake Chad for the first time in the face of the debacle experienced by their auxiliary riflemen of another age.
du lac Tchad. Pour une première fois, face à la débâcle que connaissent leurs supplétifs, les tirailleurs auxiliaires d'un autre âge, ils ont transféré
They transferred 400 fighters from the Islamic State in West Africa, or in the West African provinces as it pompously calls it.
en Afrique de l'Ouest ou dans les provinces ouest-africaines comme ils l'appellent pompeusement, dans le triangle Burkina,
In the triangle Burkina, Niger, Mali. This happened from the 21st to the 24th of the month of April.
au 24 du mois
Last month in this 2025, a second batch of 350 fighters still from the Islamic State as it calls it in the provinces of West Africa.
deuxième lot de 350 combattants toujours de SWAP, l'État islamique comme il l'appelle, dans les provinces de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Mais là également,
But here also I want to demonstrate that it has nothing Islamic about it. It is mercenaries in the pay of the Western powers.
à la solde des puissances occidentales. Donc 350
So, unfortunately, 350 are in the north of Benin, which is currently abandoned by the Beninese armed forces under the pretext of creating strategic depth.
forces armées béninoises, sous prétexte de créer une profondeur stratégique. Quelle profondeur
What strategic depth can Benin suffer?
le Bénin peut s'offrir? Tout ceci
All this is only French inspiration to give free rein to all evils to attack exclusively the countries of the AES Confederation.
libre à tous les malveillants de s'en prendre exclusivement au pays de la Confédération. Ça également sera
This will also be detailed in the questions that will certainly come.
les questions qui viendront certainement. Donc, pour
So, to summarize,
synthétiser,
I provided a historical overview to demonstrate that all the countries that have faced this geopolitical geostrategic war from 1979 to the present day have not survived.
confrontés de 79 à nos jours à cette guerre géostratégique, géopolitique, ne s'en sont pas sortis. Pour démontrer
To demonstrate all the means used by France, accompanied, as I've said and I repeat, by the European Union and at one point by the United States of America,
l'Union européenne et à un certain moment des États-Unis d'Amérique sont des moyens
A
colossaux
colossal means that could have made it possible, as they said, we want you to intervene with the terrorists.
ont dit aux terroristes qu'ils ont rencontrés dans le lit du lac Tchad.
They encountered in the bed of Lake Chad because we cannot intervene openly.
Vous intervenez parce que nous ne pouvons pas intervenir ouvertement. Certaines puissances,
Some powers will not let us do so.
c'est ce qu'ils ont dit aux terroristes.
This is what they told the terrorists of Boko Haram and Boko Haram. Since there are two wings, we will give you the means to finish off the countries of the Confederation, starting with Niger.
Avec les pays de la Confédération, en commençant par le Niger, exprimez vos besoins,
Express your needs, whether financial, material, or in human resources.
qu'ils soient en ressources humaines. Et vos vœux seront...
And your wishes will be granted.
Ça, c'est eux qui leur ont dit ça en mars.
That's what they told them in March of this year, 2025, on March 15th to be exact,
Rencontre à laquelle
a meeting attended by the French delegation, the American delegation, and the delegation speaking on behalf of Great Britain and certain European Union and African countries, particularly West African.
la Grande-Bretagne et certains pays de l'Union européenne et africains, particulièrement ouest-africains. C'est pour dire
This is to say that these imperialist neo-colonial powers have spared no effort in destabilizing us.
n'ont pas lésiné
And if we
sur
resist,
les moyens
if we hold out despite the obvious financial and economic difficulties of our three states, it is an undeniable effort, I mean an undeniable effort, by the states of the Sahel alliance through their defense and security forces,
évidente, financièrement, économiquement, de nos trois États, c'est un effort indéniable
an effort that allows us to control the situation, to contain the situation and to reverse the trend despite everything that has been agreed to by these neo-colonial
à
powers.
travers leurs forces de défense et de sécurité, effort qui permet de contrôler la situation, d'endiguer la situation et d'inverser la tendance malgré tout ce qui a été consenti par ces puissances néocoloniales. C'est pour dire au peuple de la Confédération
This is to tell the people of the AES Confederation and the African people that the Confederation represents.
malgré
I mean the Confederation, I mean that our people must be proud of what we have achieved, must be proud of what we have achieved when we know that it is a systematic encirclement operation of the Confederation that was planned through, I repeat, the riflemen of our age or their auxiliaries and the French, Europeans and Westerners alike.
nous avons réussi. Ils doivent être fiers de ce que nous avons réussi quand on sait que c'est une opération d'encerclement systématique de la Confédération qui a été planifiée à travers, je le répète, les tirailleurs d'un autre âge ou leurs auxiliaires et spahis français, européens et occidentaux en un mot. Donc, c'est une situation.
So it is a situation that we control. It is certainly a difficult situation here. This is a situation that has geostrategic and geopolitical ramifications of neo-colonialist interests.
Géostratégique, géopolitique d'intérêt néocolonialiste. Nos peuples doivent être fiers.
Our people must be proud of their defense and security forces. Mr. President, we also note that the security situation is more difficult in western Niger than in the three-border area, compared to the eastern area, particularly around Lake Chad where Boko Haram is rife. How can we explain this situation?
Qui ont cours sont l'expression des
All these ongoing events are the expression of the interests and geopolitics of neo-colonial imperialist powers that use auxiliaries that we have stopped calling jihadists or terrorists, but who use neo-colonialist auxiliaries through which they wage war on our states.
D'appeler djihadistes ou terroristes, mais qui utilisent des auxiliaires néocolonialistes à travers lesquels ils mènent la guerre à nos États. Nous sommes en état de guerre.
We are in a state of war. The countries I mentioned that have not held up in the face of this situation are palpable proof for any skeptic.
Sont une preuve palpable pour tout sceptique.
We are living in a war situation, a neo-colonialist war situation guided by neo-colonialist interests.
Néocolonialiste, guidé par des intérêts néocolonialistes. Le lac Tchad a été à un certain moment le centre
Lake Chad was at one point the center of interest of these neo-colonial powers. Lake Chad does not date from 2015, May 15th. Lake Chad dates from before 2015.
Le lac Tchad date d'avant 2015. Nous savons de quand date.
We know when Lake Chad dates from. I particularly served in Lake Chad in the 1996-1997. It is true that these were different movements and they found their solutions in different ways because at the time there was no neo-colonialist involvement.
Solution de façon différente parce que à l'époque il n'y avait pas d'implication néocolonialiste. À travers la négociation ou les négociations.
Through negotiation or negotiations, we had reached agreements that we celebrate every April 24th at home in Niger.
Que nous fêtons chaque 24 avril chez nous au Niger. La journée de la
The end of the Concord Day. So, to return to the situation that concerns us today, Lake Chad was, at a certain point in time from 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, until 2025 at the beginning of the year, the center of interest of these neo-colonialist powers.
Jusqu'à 2025, début d'année, le centre d'intérêt de ces puissances néocolonialistes. Mais avec la création de l'Alliance des États du Sahel,
But with the creation of the Alliance of Sahel states, neo-colonialist geostrategic and geopolitical interests have shifted their focus to the new area of interests and the confederal space where this confederal space is located.
le nouvel espace de ces intérêts est l'espace confédéral. Où se situe cet espace confédéral? Il se situe au confluent.
It is located at the confluence of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. I said confluence, of course, to simplify.
Je dis confluent, c'est pour schématiser.
Bien sûr.
Le nouveau pôle
This new pole of interests of these powers, and this is the essential reason why, since the creation of the Alliance of Sahel States, followed by the Confederation, we have witnessed an intensification of actions against our states.
La création de l'Alliance des États du Sahel, suivie de la Confédération, nous avons assisté à une intensification des actions contre nos États. Les intérêts ayant basculé du lac Tchad
With
vers
interests having shifted from Lake Chad to the Alliance of Sahel States and later the Confederation of Sahel States, the Western powers have also transferred their proxy, their neo-colonialist auxiliary skirmisher, to wage war against us in our confederal space.
transférer leur proxy, leur tirailleurs auxiliaires néocolonialistes pour nous mener la guerre dans notre espace confédéral. Parce qu'il fallait par tous les moyens.
Because it was necessary by all means, that one of the states falls, and that is what justifies the active involvement of certain American interest groups alongside France, which naturally has never squandered its hostility and its determination to preserve. Perhaps it is rational logic on its part, to preserve its interests in states that are not considered sovereign states, and certain quotes will make you understand.
À préserver, peut-être que c'est logique ou rationnel de sa part de préserver ses intérêts dans des États qui ne sont pas considérés comme des États souverains. Et certaines citations vous feront comprendre. Jusqu'ici, le prisme...
So far the prism with which France and certain citizens, the French elite who lead, I don't know if we should call them French destiny, in any case, who are at the head of the French state or the advisors of those who are at the head of the French state, because the daughters of French colonies not to be lost by all means.
Ou les conseillers de ceux qui sont à la tête de l'État français qualifient de colonie française à ne pas perdre par tous les moyens. Ça veut dire ce que ça veut dire.
It means what it means, and it is a lesson for the ECOWAS countries who think they are independent, while they are the prosperity of their sons and grandchildren, who are at the risk of seeing, in their own words, migration change direction.
Française au XXIe siècle, et que la France ne devait en aucun cas perdre pour la prospérité de ses fils et de ses petits-fils, au risque de voir, selon leurs propres mots, la migration changer de direction. Parce que si cela...
Because if that happened, according to these French geniuses, it is the French who will cross to come to these former colonies if these colonies manage to free themselves to seek their subsistence.
Vers ces anciennes colonies, si toutefois ces colonies arrivent à se libérer, pour chercher leur subsistance. Donc c'est pour vous dire que ce qui se passe...
So this is to tell you that what is happening in the confederal space is the result of a deep reflection guided by the defense of interests declared war, who have never declared war on them.
Profonde, guidée par la défense des intérêts géostratégiques, géopolitiques de ces puissances coloniales qui sont prêtes à marcher sur les cadavres des citoyens africains de la Confédération qui ne leur ont jamais déclaré la guerre. Mais que ces puissances occidentales...
But let these Western powers hold back to say if their war is aimed at preserving, I mean preserving their opulence, their prosperity, so that their descendants do not suffer.
Préserver, je dis bien de préserver, leur opulence, leur prospérité, pour que leur descendance ne souffre, cette guerre que nous menons.
This war that we are waging with such determination is a matter of life or death for our states.
Question de vie ou de mort pour nos États. Le combat n'est pas le même.
The fight is not the same and will not be the same. We are fighting for our survival. We are fighting for the survival of the African man, period, and I am sure victory will be ours.
Pour la survie de l'homme africain tout court, et je suis sûr, Inch'Allah, la victoire sera de notre côté. Donc c'est ce qui fait que
So that's why everything that happens in this space is exaggeration based on amplified events, events that are often tragic but fabricated, by France, and we have the proof. We have the physical evidence.
Sur des événements amplifiés, des événements souvent tragiques, mais montés de toutes pièces par la France, et ça nous en avons les preuves.
We have the physical evidence because we have actors who actively participated in it.
Parce que nous avons des acteurs qui y ont participé activement. Le camp a changé.
The site has changed.
Vers ce que nous
From Lake
appelons
Chad to what we call the confederal space. It's the strategic interests that have changed, and it's a question of protecting neocolonialist interests in order to prevent the AES states from making a mark in Africa.
protection des intérêts néocolonialistes afin d'empêcher aux États de l'AES de faire tâche en Afrique. Parce que c'est ça la plus grande préoccupation.
Because that's the greatest concern of these powers. If the AES succeeds, other countries that haven't had the courage until now to show themselves will follow in the Confederation's footsteps, and the West is perfectly prepared for it to fail.
Les pas de la Confédération. Et ça, l'Occident s'entend à merveille pour que ça échoue. Mais la vérité et la
But truth and victory are on the side of the Confederation, and we are, but we don't consider ourselves victims.
Mais nous ne nous considérons pas comme des victimes. Nous sommes objets de complots néocolonialistes. Nous n'allons
We are
jamais
obliged to engage in a neo-colonialist plot. We will never cry over our fate. We will use our dignity to fight, and we are convinced that the outcome will be victory for the countries of the Alliance of Sahel States Confederation.
sera la victoire du côté des pays de la Confédération Alliance des États du Sahel. Quitte aux autres pays de nous accompagner.
It's up to other countries to join us. Before it's too late, not for us, but for them, because history will remember that there were traitors and accomplices, whether passively or actively, in what is currently happening in our country.
Passive ou active de ce qui se déroule actuellement dans notre espace. Ils seront complices des milliers de
They will be accomplices in the thousands of military and civilian ranks that are results of Western greed.
La résultante de la cupidité occidentale. Pour faire un petit rapprochement,
To make a small comparison, people must understand that the West does not care about the communities that constitute our confederal space. The West is trying to make people understand that it is out of humanism that they are intervening in our space to protect targeted and massacred communities.
notre espace confédéral. L'Occident cherche à faire comprendre que c'est par humanisme qu'ils sont en train d'intervenir dans notre espace pour protéger des communautés ciblées et massacrées. Mais je vous donne un petit exemple.
But I will give you a small example.
Se fasse son opinion. Le conflit qui a cours
How many deaths? We recorded in 1 year, 6 months ago, more than 50,000 deaths, more than 200,000 wounded, 50,000 deaths, mostly Palestinian men, women and children. But where are all these humanists? Where are all these powers quick to intervene or to arrogate to themselves the right of humanitarian intervention?
plus de 200 000 blessés, 50 000 morts, majoritairement hommes, femmes et enfants.
Of course, humanitarian interference when it comes to the countries of the Confederation, but humanitarian interference no longer makes sense.
Où sont toutes ces puissances promptes à intervenir ou à s'arroger le droit d'ingérence humanitaire? Bien sûr, d'ingérence humanitaire quand il s'agit des pays de la Confédération. Mais ingérence humanitaire qui n'a plus de sens, même
Even in relation to the organization that brings us together today, the 194 countries, which is the United Nations.
l'Organisation des Nations Unies. L'ONU. Toutes ces organisations, tous ces pays sont
All these organizations, all these countries are inaudible today. This is to tell you that it is not out of humanism that people are campaigning, it is purely to defend geostrategic interests in our space.
c'est purement pour défendre des intérêts géostratégiques dans notre espace. Donc pour conclure à
So, to conclude, your question is about geostrategic stakes that at one point or another reverse the trends of the perception of destabilization that we have in a sector like Lake Chad initially, to be transferred to the confederal space of the Sahel states.
les tendances de la perception de la déstabilisation que nous avons dans un secteur comme le lac Tchad initialement, pour être transféré dans l'espace confédéral des États du Sahel. C'est juste ce jeu impérialiste
It's just this imperialist game we're witnessing.